الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. إن شاء الله نكمل we continue with the book of المعاملات or the book of الفقه الميسر, and we are still in the chapter of المعاملات, and we just finished الإجارة briefly, and the next chapter is الوقف. The next chapter is الوقف, and as we said, they translate it in the English version. As we know it, this is the endowment, but we'll keep it as al-waqf, inshallah. So when we say al-waqf, we know what we refers to, right? When we refer to, so al-waqf, as we'll define it, this is part of like a contract, and we'll see the types of it, or the different types of it, and the definitions and the conditions for it. And this is one of the mahasin al-Islam, one of the beautiful things in the deen of al-Islam, the subject of al-waqf, and many great benefits that happened as a result of this. And many people today, they don't apply al-waqf the way it ought to be. And as we will see, inshallah ta'ala, a statement by Jabir radiallahu anhu, Qudama mentioned that in al-Mughni, he said something, and I want to start with this because it shows the importance of it. He says, لم يكن أحد من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ذو مقدرة إلا وقف. There was no one of the companions of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم ذو مقدرة, that he had the ability, he had the financial ability, unless they waqf, unless they made waqf. So this is an act of charity, of goodness, that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, many of them done the waqf, and to the extent of which, as Jabir radiallahu anhu said, anyone that had means, they would make waqf. Umar radiallahu anhu did, as the hadith will be mentioned. Anas radiallahu anhu, Zubayr ibn al-Awam radiallahu anhu. Nowadays, people are more concerned with the wasiyah, right? And they want things to happen after they die. So they're more concerned about the wasiyah and what I should have in my will and things like this. He wants to enjoy what he have in his life. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they would give the waqf, and as you see the definition of the waqf, that it stays, and the benefit of it in one's lifetime, and it's extended forever, as long as it, of course, in place. So what is al-waqf? Al-waqf, linguistically, is the masdar, is the pronoun of waqafa. When you stand up, it's waqaf. وَجَمْعُهُ أَوْقَاف, but then the meaning of it is وَقَفَ الشَّيْء وأوقفه وحبسه وأحبسه وسبله بمعنى واحد. When you retain something, when you withhold something, when you make something not being given away. So the word waqaf can mean standing, or you stop something from something else. So basically, and the word awqaf. So as we will see also the definition of it in religiously, it gives that meaning, something that is retained or withheld for a specific reason, for a specific benefit. And في الاصطلاح, if you can read the English translation, what it says in the English religious definition.
It refers to retaining a property or source while distributing
No.
proceeds.
No. So the Arabic هو تحبيس الأصل وتسبيل المنفعة. These are 4 words. The definition of al-waqf. تحبيس الأصل. Al-asl means, have you heard the word al-asl before? Asl means the foundation, the principle. It's used many different ways. Like usul as-sunnah, the principles of the sunnah, usul al-fiqh, the foundation, the principles of the fiqh. So al-asl is when something is fixed. So تحبيس الأصل, تحبيس from al-habs, when you withhold something. It's the same word used for prison, for example, right? So when you withhold the asl, or something, or an object, or whatever can be done or can be given as waqf. And then وتسبيل المنفعة. Al-manfa'a is the benefit. Tasbil is that you would, comes from the sabil, like fi sabilillah, that you would give, and from al-itlaq, that you would let go to the benefit. So something that it would never be sold, never be, that they would get rid of it, but the benefit that comes from it, it's to be given to whatever specific things mentioned in the waqf. So this is the definition of al-waqf, and it will be explained. So before we get into the explanations, for example, if someone makes a building as a waqf, so the building is an asl. So this is the asl. Tahbisul asl, that means never to sell this building or this land. Say a land, piece of land, never to sell it. Then tasbilul manfa'a, then the benefit that comes from this land, renting it, doing whatever farming and planting, and then selling the crops and things like this is the benefit. Tasbil, to give it for whatever sources of khair, or whatever you specify if you make it as waqf, as we will mention inshallah ta'ala. So it's as you see, there's so much details to it. But again, we have asl and we have manfa'a. We have something physical, something to be fixed, and something that is benefit. You make tahbis, you withhold the asl, and the benefit keeps on being distributed the way that you would specify. So what is the foundation of this? Where this al-waqf comes from? He says this is clearly stated in the Sunnah, authentic Sunnah from the Prophet ﷺ, and of course ijma' al-ummah, the consensus among the ummah. As from the Sunnah, in the Sahihain in Bukhari and Muslim, that Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, Ya Rasulullah, inni asabtu malan bi Khaybar, lam asib qattu malan anfasa indi min, fama ta'muruni fi. Sahaba are amazing, subhanAllah. He said, O Messenger of Allah, inni asabtu malan, I gained some money from Khaybar that I've never had the like of it before in my life. More precious than this in my life before. Something that he never get the same quantity or the same precious type of wealth. And the wealth doesn't have to be cash money, land, things like this. فَمَا تَأْمُرُنِي فِي, what do you command me to do? That means he's asking to give it for the sake of Allah or to benefit from it. He says, قَالَ إِنْ شِئْتَ حَبِسْتَ أَصْلَهَ. The Prophet ﷺ said that to him. In shi't, if you wish, حَبَسْتَ أَصْلَهَ. حَبَسْتَ, again, you withhold أصلها, meaning the foundation of this. That means that wealth, this land, you keep it, meaning you don't sell it. وَتَصَدَّقْتَ بِهَا, and you would give the charity from it. غَيْرَ أَنَّهُ لَا يُبَاعُ أَصْلُهَا, with the condition that the asla of it, that means, for example, this land is not to be sold, وَلَا يُهَبْ, and not to be given as a gift, وَلَا يُوَرَّث, and not to be passed in inheritance. So the Prophet ﷺ stated all the different rulings that will come from the subject of al-waqf. So someone that has something of value, so it's malan. Mal ma yutamawwal bi, something of value, and we'll see the condition, something that has to stay. Not, for example, you making a waqf for some apples, people eat it and then it's the end of it. No, something has to be that stays for a long period of time, and you would give it forever, and it's not to be ever sold, it's not to be ever given as a gift, and it's not to be passed in inheritance. So it goes out from your own ownership to be fi sabilillah, to be for the sake of Allah, for whatever you specify. And it stays after you and from one generation to the other till whether it goes away or something happens. So what happened? فَتَصَدَّقَ بِهَا عُمَرْ. Umar radiallahu anhu, he gave it in charity like this. وَذَوِي عَلَى الْفُقَرَاء, to be given the benefit of it, the benefit from this land to be given to the fuqara, to the poor. وَذَوِي الْقُرْبَى, and his relatives. وَالرِّقَابِ, and to free slaves. وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, and فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, here when it's mentioned, that means for al-jihad fi sabilillah. وَبِنِ السَّبِيلِ, and the wayfarer. وَالضَّيْف, and the guest. وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَى مَنْ, so this is how he specified whatever benefits comes from it is to be given to these things in specifics. And this is one of the benefits of the waqf, the same thing as they do with the endowment, where you specify where the benefit is going to go specifically. And as you see here, الضيف, the guest has a right. So when you have a guest coming, he has a right upon you. So to host him, what is the obligation? For how many days? 3 days. He has a right on you. And they used to be in the past, if you don't host him, you can go to the qadi, to the judge. He didn't host me. Someone that comes from a distance to you, things of that nature. So sometimes the person doesn't have means. So he made a waqf for the ضيف. And the waqf was in such a way, and this is one of the subjects that when you read in the history of Muslims and the ulama and things like this, amazing things are mentioned there. They made waqf basically for everything, every matter. And that's why the ummah was so much in prosperity and fulfilling all kinds of needs for the sake of Allah because of the subject of the waqf. Someone would make waqf for the poor, for the masakeen, for this and that, for books, for anything. And they would make sometimes extreme conditions or things like this, but it was something that they would do for the sake of Allah. So then he says, وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَى مَنْ وَلِيَهَا. And if someone is in charge of it, because it can be a business, it can be a land or whatever, the one in charge of it, أَنْ يَأْكُلَ مِنْهَا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, that he would eat from it بالمعروف, with what is known. Someone is in charge of this land and it has fruits or dates or whatever, he can eat from it with the ma'ruf, with what's known. He's there, so he can eat from it. أو يطعم صديقا, or feed a friend غير متمول فيه, without making it as a business, or he takes and he sells and things. It's not permissible. But to eat from it, to have someone to eat from it, it's not like it's haram. This is one piece of fruit is not permissible to eat from it because it's waqf. The one that is in charge of it, he can eat with the ma'ruf. والوقف مما اختص به المسلمون. This is something unique for the Muslims and how they become widespread and well established. As then he mentioned the statement of Jabir رضي الله عنه: لم يكن أحد من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ذو مقدرة إلا وقف. Such an important statement. None of the Sahaba رضي الله عنهم that had financial ability unless they made waqf. So you see how much it was widespread among the Sahaba رضي الله عنهم, those who have, of course, means. He says here, وهذا يبين أن ما عليه الناس الآن عكس ما عرف في عصر الصحابة. What people are upon today, for the most part, is opposite to how things were at the time of the Sahaba رضي الله عنهم. Most of the people, they don't know except the wasiyah. They only know the wasiyah, and they don't know the waqf. So this is something that needs to be revived. And it doesn't have to be big institutions that makes a waqf. You can make a waqf of something small, but as long as it fulfills the conditions to come. And you can specify what benefits. And if a person has means, this is one of the things that people should and ought to do, inshallah ta'ala, for their own benefit, even though this is not mandatory, it is all permissible. The next point, he talks about the hikmah, or the wisdom behind legislating al-waqf. He says, one, it gives the encouragement for those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them ease with wealth, that they would increase their obedience and rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to get themselves closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they would فَيُخَصِّصُوا شَيْئًا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمُ الْعَيْنِيَّةِ, they would give a specific portion of their wealth, مَا يَبْقَى أَصْلُ, what its foundation or its principle stays the same, and the benefit continues to be given from the principle of it. خشية أن يؤول المال بعد مفارقة الحياة. And sometimes it's out of the fear that if a person passes away, the money can be lost, can be given to where it's not going to be spent in the right way, and nobody will guard it. Especially when it comes to the sadaqah al-jariyah, the continuous charity. As we know that when a person dies, his deeds are terminated, the book of deeds are closed, except in three things. One of which is sadaqah jariyah, a continuous charity. And many people, they wait and they expect others after they pass away to make charity on their behalf and it to be jariyah, to be continuous. That's fine, but what is best is for a person to do it in his lifetime, to make sure that he gives a sadaqah jariyah in his lifetime, and not just in the wasiyah, but also to make it in his lifetime, and that's basically al-waqf. To have something that is a continuous charity in his lifetime, which is the waqf, basically. So this is one of the best investments that a person can do to himself. And then he says, ودفعا لكل هذه التوقعات ومشاركة في أعمال الخيرات شرع الوقف. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made this part of the deen for the person to manage his own waqf in his lifetime before he passes away. So this is such an important part of the waqf. Right, so you make for yourself what's going to stay for you after you die, and this is the best ways of making charity. And the real sadness or misery is when someone, his life is limited to his only life that he lives on the face of earth. And the real successful one is the one that his life is extended for a long period of time. After he dies, still, the good things that he passed on, whether it's ilm, whether it's wealth, people have different abilities and things of that nature. And even if you teach someone something that you know that people do not know, worldly matters, yeah, whatever there is, but a person should have that concern so that how can we extend our life? Because our life is nothing but a'mal or actions. This is how it's going to be in the day of judgment. The second thing is al-waqf is one of the main reason for establishing the masajid, the madaris, the schools, and all kinds of good deeds as a result of this. You can name it: schools, masajid. And he says most of the masajid in the history of Muslims was established upon the awqaf. And even with anything that a masjid needs, it's part of the awqaf. Carpets, cleaning, the al-razq is mentioned, the razq that is given to those who maintain it. And this has always been the subject of al-awqaf. That's why you would find in every Muslim country there is awqaf, but this is also one of the things that the shaitan, he works so that they would eliminate this awqaf among the Muslims because of the great benefits that it has to not just the masajid but all kinds of different benefits, students of knowledge, matters of deen, matters of worldly benefits that people would benefit from, and so on. The next thing is, he says al-fadl waqf. What makes a person waqf or mawquf is when you say something directly. You say waqaft, وحبست وسبلت. These are direct words of al-waqf. وقفت something. You say وقفت هذه الأرض, وقفت هذه السيارة. I made waqfa for this thing. وحبست also, which I'm withholding something. وسبلت, that means I give the benefit from it, to keep the benefit from it coming. And it can be also said with an indirect or an implicit statement. As if for a person say تصدقت. If a person says I give this for charity, but he means by this that it's going to be like the waqf. وحرمت, or I forbade this on for it to be sold. وأبت, I make it forever. And of course, when it comes, because this is the contract and words has to be clear, either it's a direct word and it can be done with speech, it doesn't have to be written, of course, or it can be said with something that is indirect. But if it's both together, then definitely for sure it's waqf. So either it's a direct word or a direct word with a non-direct word, also that counts as waqf. Or if it's indirect, then it depends on the intentions of the person. And he has to then make it clear to the people, because if he dies, what's that thing that he left is for? And that's why he says the al-fadl kinaya. Al-kinaya is when you say something can mean more than one thing. If it evident to be on al-waqf with one of three things, whether it's a niyyah, the intentions of the person. The second thing is, he says إذا اقترنت الألفاظ الكنائية بواحدة من الألفاظ الصريحة أو الكنائية. If, as we mentioned, these indirect words would be mentioned with one of the direct ones, like تصدقت بكذا صدقة موقوفة. A person would say, I gave this as صدقة, but صدقة موقوفة. صدقة to be with waqf, basically. صدقة or endowment, or a person would say it in a way that it's going to be muhabbasa, it's going to be forever, things like this. This is, again, to add words to it to make it clear. Or the third one, that a person would give a characteristics or describe it by saying this is muharrama. This type of wealth or whatever, it's forbidden. No one is to sell it. No one is to give it as a gift. And so this is also means that it's waqf. So this is how to make this waqf, because it's a contract. And of course, with writing, it makes things very clear, especially to avoid any disputes and things like this. Also, it can happen with action. How's an example to this? If someone makes a land as a masjid, he doesn't have to write anything. He doesn't have to do anything. Just made as a land as a masjid, and he made adhan in there and make salah. I remember one time we were in a place where it's a land, a piece of land, and a town that people became Muslims. They became Muslims and there's no masjid. and there's a land. Okay, this is the land is going to be a masjid. So one stone here, one stone at the end, like this. This is a masjid. Waqf. It's done. Even if there's no building or anything. Then people made adhan and they made salah. And then later on they built it. So it becomes waqf. So that's why there's certain categories here, which he says there are two types of waqf, which is two terminologies that are used nowadays more than anything else. It's not necessarily present in the old books of fiqh. خيري وأهلي. الوقف الخيري from al-khayr, of course, which is al-awqaf al-khayriyya or something like this, where a person would make the waqf for like a charitable organization or a good place, even for a specific time. And then after that, it becomes on someone else. Like, for example, a person would give a hospital or school, and then after that, he would, as they say, to give it to his children, for example. So this issue of having it as a temporary, does not count as a waqf if it's temporary, but rather if someone gives, like for example, someone gives something for the masjid or for the institution of the masjid, so that the benefit of it, he has an apartment building, for example. He says, I make this waqf, and the money that comes from it is to be given to the masjid for the maintenance of the masjid. This is waqf. الوقف الأهلي أو الذري is when a person starts making waqf for his own self or for specific individuals. Meaning, can you make waqf for your own self? Some difference of opinions in this, but it's valid. Like, for example, a person would make waqf and he say the money that comes from it, this portion is for myself, this portion is for this individual, that individual, my sons, my daughters, whatever there is. You know, things like this in his lifetime. So they immediately get the benefit of it, not after he dies. If a person says that this is to be done after he dies, this is called wasiyah. It's not called waqf. And if it's wasiyah, which is a mas'ala, if someone says that this building, this apartment building that he owns, after he dies, it's to be given for the masjid and for the masjid to benefit from it with rent and things like this. This is wasiyah and this is not waqf. So if a person dies, if he dies, then what is the ruling of the wasiyah? He cannot make in his wasiyah more than 1/3 of what he has. So if this apartment building is more than 1/3 of what he passed on with the inheritance, then it's not permissible, only to be given, if they're able to do that, up to 1/3, because it's the wasiyah. During his lifetime, he can make waqf the way that he likes. Before we continue, inshallah ta'ala, which is mahal al-waqf, I just wanted to have something on the side here and to be part of what we learn, inshallah ta'ala. There is and it will come, inshallah. One of the principles in al-waqf that the ulama they mention is that shart al-waqif kalafd al-shar', meaning the words that the person would say for the waqf is like the words of the deen, is to be applied exactly as he says. And that's why the waqf is a very important thing, and it's a very dangerous thing for someone to not to apply it in the right way. Meaning, if someone brings a mushaf in the masjid, he says, he doesn't have to say, he put this mushaf in the masjid and he leaves. He wants to have it in the masjid. So this becomes waqf for this masjid. It is not permissible for someone to take it home and read from it and bring it back. A person would say, but I'm giving him rewards, because if I take the mushaf and I read it at home, he will get rewards and then I'll bring it back. It's not permissible. You know, if a person even can specify, can bring something like that, and it says, this mushaf, I'm bringing it here and it's not to leave this room, not to go to the office. He can. Right? And if the masjid agrees, right, that means it has to be applied this way. So the words of al-waqif is like the wahy. Of course, his words is not like the wahy. It has to be applied exactly the same as he said. And that's why the words that he says or she says, sometimes it's contradicting, and that's why there's conditions for it. If he says two opposite things, which makes it impossible, then it doesn't work. Like if someone says, I make this as waqf, but if someone comes with the right price, sell it. It doesn't work this way. You're waqf or you're selling it? So things like this. So that's why it has to be precisely followed. Like, for example, in the past, when someone would make a waqf, a place for teaching knowledge, but the one that teaches here has to be the most knowledgeable in the town. So they make it very difficult for the people. Everybody would say, I'm not the most knowledgeable, I'm not the most knowledgeable. So, but again, his words has to be applied and not to be at ease with it. If there's a masjid being built, can people sell the masjid and just find some other place? Of course not. It's waqf. Once it's a masjid, then it's waqf. A musalla is not a masjid. There's differences. One of the differences between a musalla and a masjid is that the masjid, its land is waqf. You can have a place for people to pray, but the land of it is not waqf. So anytime they can sell it. But a masjid, you cannot sell it. So the land of it is waqf. And that's why if the land is not waqf, it's not a masjid. The land has to be waqf. The land has to be given forever to be for a masjid. And therefore, again, one of the strange things that I heard a few weeks back is that people, they have a masjid, and the masjid was written by someone's name as far as the legality of it, and he decided to sell it. So he's selling the masjid. And the one he's going to take the money and do something else with it. This is, of course, it's haram. So if a person, this is, we have to be careful with how, a person might say that this is a masjid, but the papers of it is in his name or something like this. He said it's a masjid, that means it's waqf for forever. If he says this is a musalla, you guys can pray here as long as I'm around, that's fine. But if he says this is a masjid, then, and the intentions and the way things are, then it's something that has to be forever. And many things with the masajid, or even with schools, or even with money to be left with waqf, what is specifically that he's saying, then this has to be followed specifically with very strictness in it. And that's why people have to review it first. They used to read the words of the waqf before they would go along with it. Because what if they're not able to fulfill it? So they have to make sure that this is something that would be applied. So it's a huge subject, as I said. Then, unless, of course, the place that made waqf is of no benefit anymore. The ulama mentioned this. If إذا ضاق المسجد بأهله, if people, for example, you have a masjid here and it's a waqf, and someone comes with $1 billion saying, I don't like the design of the masjid. Let's, rebuild it again, and we'll make it bigger than what it is now. It's not permissible. Unless there's a necessity. There's no space for anybody. And the only way for them to make it bigger is that they have to do something to it. That's fine. Because those who build it, they build it with the waqf, so it to stay the way it is. Or, for example, someone made a masjid close by, and then the two masjids are very close. So one can change to be a school versus a masjid. Of course, that requires fatwas and things like this. But the subject of something that is waqf, that becomes of no benefit whatsoever. Or mushaf that becomes very old, or pages are torn from it. So then, of course, to dispose it in the proper way. So this is, again, the principle that I mentioned now is that the condition of the person that is making the waqf, the ulama, they mention, is like kalafz al-shari'. Shari' is like the sharia. Like his words is like the sharia is to be followed. And that's why there are conditions to it. We can just list some of these conditions that the ulama, they mentioned, one of which is that it has to be from an owner or someone that acts on his behalf. So the waqf has to be from an owner, of course, which is an obvious thing. The second thing is the mawquf, the subject that he will give it as waqf, has to be a specific thing, ayn, something's an object that is permissible to sell it if it's to be sold. Like you cannot make waqf for something that you cannot sell it. Of course, it's not permissible to sell it, but what is meant by this is, say something that can never be sold. That means you can never make it as waqf. So it has to be something that if it was to be sold, it would have been sold. And the benefit of it is permissible, of course. The benefit that comes from it is permissible, and it would stay forever to the best of one's ability or knowledge. Even if it changes or so, that's fine, but something that stays for some time. And that's why you can't make a waqf for some gallons of water, for example, even though this is a charity and it's to be given for the poor and people can drink, but it goes away. But people make waqf like this with cold waters on the road and things like this. That's fine as long as they have to maintain it all the time. For example, if someone donated lights for the masjid, right? Is that waqf or it's not waqf? It's just a different terminology to it. But according to some, it's waqf, which is it is waqf, meaning that you cannot take these lamps and take it to another masjid because he donated it to this masjid. You cannot take extra to your home, for example, or a chair in the masjid. Well, I need a chair at home and there's extra here, so let me take one. And I'm the imam of the masjid. No, it doesn't work this way because the chair was bought for the masjid. So this is waqf for the masjid. Even if it's for some period of time and then it's going to be exchanged by something else. So this is the second one. The third one, this waqf has to be as a deed or a good deed of matters of righteousness. Like you would give it to the poor, you would give it to something good, not to give it to something sinful. Like someone, for example, is a singer, so he makes a waqf to spend on the singers, for example. Things like it has to be matters of righteousness and goodness and matters of deen. Another condition is that it has to be not conditioned with one's death. Otherwise, it becomes wasiyah, as we heard. So they use the word munajjazan, meaning that once he says waqaftu, now it's established. Even before you even give the land away. Once he says waqaftu, I made waqf for this land, that means it's immediately waqf. And not to be with a condition. Another condition that he should not have a condition that negates what waqf means. Like, for example, I make this as a waqf, but if I get poor, I'm going to sell it. I'm going to take it back. That's not waqf. So it has to be, without a invalid condition. And the last one is ala ta'bid, it's forever. So once it goes away from the person, he cannot take it back. This is done. He's done with it. And this is how it should be. And this is part of some of the conditions here. There are many examples, many things, of course, when it comes to the waqf. And then next time we stopped by mahil al-waqf. What is the actual thing to be made waqf of? Even with the simplest things. That's why, for example, in the masajid, people have to be extremely careful. If someone got itr over there, right? This is waqf. Even if he didn't say anything, he put it in the masjid. So is it permissible for someone to take it outside? No, to keep it in the masjid. Can someone takes the water of the masjid to use it outside? It's not permissible. The water in the masjid is for the wudu in the masjid. People drink in the masjid, but not for someone to get a pipe and use it for, somewhere else. Things like this. So anything that is waqf is, again, depends on what the person's intention is versus what the masjid owns something. This is something else also, but it's all part of what the waqf is supposed to be. Let's stop here, inshallah. And if you have any questions after the hadith, inshallah. Don't want to keep you for a long period of time. In the hadiths of Bulugh al-Maram, the last hadith that we took, and وَإِذَا وَجَدَ أَحَدُكُمْ فِي بَطْنِهِ. Okay. Here is the hadith number 76. Hadith number 76. He says, ready? عن أبي قتادة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يمسكن أحدكم ذكره بيمينه. Again, لا يمسكن أحدكم ذكره بيمينه وهو يبول ولا يتمسح من الخلاء بيمينه ولا يتنفس في الإناء. متفق عليه واللفظ لمسلم. The hadith has very specific things. The Prophet ﷺ is forbidding three things here. The first one, لا يمسكن أحدكم ذكره بيمينه وهو يبول. None of you should يمسكن. الإمساك is when you hold something. أحدكم, one of you, ذكره. الذكر is the private parts. بيمينه, and the ذكر versus the أنثى, so this is the male part. بيمينه, with his right hand, while he is يبول, while he is urinating. And there's no لا حياء, there's no shyness in matters of deen. This is something that even children should be taught. That if urinating, they should not, hold their private part with the right hand. وهو يبول. That's the first one. Because the right hand is left for what is honored and eating and drinking and things like this. ولا يتمسح من الخلاء بيمينه. The second one, لا يتمسح. المسح is when you wipe. And يتمسح, that means wiping. من الخلاء, from الخلاء is one of the place where a person relieve himself. So من الخلاء, it's also one of the ways to keep it in a very pleasant way of describing it. So none of you should wipe, meaning when he goes to the khala, when he urinate or defecate, with his right hand. So never to wipe yourself with the right hand when you go to the bathroom. You do that with the left hand. And the last one, ولا يتنفس في الإناء. And he should not breathe in the إناء, in the cup, in the container, in the bowl that you're drinking from, anything. الإناء, anything that you will eat or drink in, do not breathe in it. Do not breathe in it. Do not blow in it because it's hot. Do not breathe in it when you're drinking. Right? You drink, as we know from the Sunnah, is to drink 3 times and to breathe each time outside of the cup. Sometimes people, when they drink, they do 3 times, but they breathe in the cup. Like 1, 2, and no, you breathe outside. So drinking 3 times, this is from the Sunnah, and breathing outside of the cup when you're drinking, even if it's your cup. A person would say maybe because someone else will drink from it. No, it's not because of that. This is no illa, no reason for it, meaning it's not because of other people. It's even for your own self, even if it's your own cup. You don't breathe in it, and you don't blow in it also, which is have another hadith that talks about this. So we'll say it again, inshallah. لا يمسكن أحدكم ذكره بيمينه وهو يبول ولا يتمسح من الخلاء بيمينه ولا يتنفس في الإناء. صلى الله وسلم على محمد وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.